Well, now the Business Secretary, Vince Cable, is with us. A week or so ago, the regulator thought the sort of measure that you're proposing now would have been very intrusive. Why did you change your minds?
I don't think we ever thought it was very intrusive, because we've already given the power to the regulator to introduce loan capping. I mean, this is the latest step in a whole series of actions to regulate this industry. You remember the Office of Fair Trading did a report, as a result of which I think 25 companies in this industry left. We've now come forward with measures to regulate the advertising, the extent to which the lenders can go back to a person's account, and now we're introducing the cap on interest rates.
Is this your departmental responsibility?
It wasn't until recently, but it's now moved into the Financial Conduct Authority, which ultimately
Couldn't it be seen by many that this was your departmental responsibility until, what, about a week ago?
Yes, very recently. Yeah.
Right. And it had to be moved out of your department and into the hands of George Osborne before anyone did anything.
Oh, come. No, this move has been planned for 2 years. We introduced all the measures to regulate the industry, and it's cross-governmental agreement. I made it very clear that we needed to listen to some of the backbenchers who were putting down amendments in Parliament, engage with them, get more evidence, and as a result of the evidence that's recently come forward on the United States and Australia, that having a cap and interest rate is practical. So there was a cross-government approach.
But when it was in your department, it wasn't considered necessary to do anything.
We considered that there was a balance of risks. We commissioned a study from the University of Bristol that warned of some of the unintended consequences.
Well, thank heavens for George Osborne coming to the protection of the consumer, eh?
He has acted, on behalf of both of us, because we were concerned that the balance of evidence now suggests the merit of a cap.
What's happened between last week and this week?
Well,
apart from the fact he's got the gig and you've lost it.
Well, I'm less concerned about that than getting the right policy. What has happened over the last week? There is a lot of argument in Parliament about the merits of the cap. Various people like the Archbishop of Canterbury are making this case. We commissioned a study from Bristol which said that there were advantages and disadvantages in an interest rate cap. We were worried about the risks. We've looked at further evidence. A state like Florida, for example, has now found a way of looking not just interest rates, but at the various fees. The evidence that we were concerned about, that this might encourage what I've called the baseball bat brigade, I think if it's properly managed, doesn't have to happen. And looking at all the evidence, we've decided that there is merit in having a cap.
So the Archbishop of Canterbury swung the day, did he?
He certainly had an influence, and also...
And George Osborne listened.
We have all listened. And the
Did you have anything to do with this decision?
I was very much involved in it. I've been involved in it all the way through with Joe Swinson, who's a minister in my department.
But you couldn't do anything
We've done
when you were in charge.
Well, we had already taken all the key steps to regulate the industry. As I'll go over them again if you like.
No, it's fine.
But there was the competition investigation, the move to regulate advertising, and the move to prevent companies abusing the payment system.
Let me ask you about what Andy Verity discovered in that piece you just saw with the mortgage brokers. Do you think it's fair that people endanger their chances of getting a mortgage simply because they've taken out a payday loan, whether they've had any difficulty repaying it or not?
Well, it isn't fair on the basis of the evidence you've just put forward. And now that the industry is being properly regulated, that should stop. And one of the key steps in the regulation is regulating advertising. So the advertising will require a company doing a payday loan to make it clear that borrowers have to seek debt advice, and if they seek debt advice, they will know the risk of imperiling their credit status.
Do you think they should have a health warning on them?
That is what will effectively happen now with the advertising.
Now, let's talk about the Co-op Bank. At the time that the Co-op was being asked to take over the 631 branches of Lloyds, you were in favour of that?
I was in favour of the general principle of co-ops and mutuals having a bigger role in banking. There was no reason at the time to assume that it was invalid. I mean, if there had been any evidence of the kind of impropriety that's emerged, it would have come through the regulator, as a lot of people are now claiming they knew it was a can of worms all along, but I don't think anybody had said so at the time.
So you didn't know?
I didn't know, no, and I don't think anybody did know, and the Treasury that conducted the detailed discussion certainly wasn't aware of it.
Do you happen to know how many times the Co-op had meetings with Treasury ministers?
Well, I think there were a fairly substantial number.
Oh, George Osborne said it was fewer than 30.
I think it was around about that number, but I'm not a Treasury Minister, I was not involved, but they were having detailed discussions, certainly.
So they were intimately involved in the decision?
Yes, and perfectly sensibly and rightly. There was a European Commission ruling that Lloyds Bank had to sell off some of its branches. The Co-op put themselves forward as a potential bidder. Nobody, I think, had initially any reason to assume they couldn't handle it. They were a substantial branch network. Their reputation was good as far as anybody was aware. The discussions proceeded, and eventually it emerged they couldn't handle it.
So what we learn from that is that trying to lay all this off on the Labour Party is nonsense, really, because you guys were heavily involved in the whole project.
Well, I've never seen it as a party political issue. I mean, I'm not sure...
You may not.
Well, I've never seen it as a party political issue. As far as I was concerned, there is a general principle that, you know, the mutuals have an important role in banking. The Co-op Bank had a good reputation. Had there been irregularities that were noticed, they would have come through the regulator. As far as I'm aware, they didn't signal that at the stage that the conversation with the Treasury took place.